the weight of the body begins to soften in small, almost unnoticeable ways, as if gravity itself has decided to loosen its hold, not all at once, but gradually, patiently, allowing each part to settle without effort, without instruction, simply by being where it already is. And as this happens, there is no need to adjust or correct anything, because the body already knows how to rest when nothing is being asked of it. Breathing continues on its own, quiet and unforced, moving in and out with a rhythm that does not need to be counted or followed, a rhythm that existed long before attention ever noticed it. And as the breath moves, it does not need to deepen or slow intentionally, because it naturally finds a calmer pace when it is no longer observed too closely. When it is allowed to pass like a gentle current, rather than something to manage, the muscles begin to release in layers, starting with the places that carry the most unnoticed tension. The jaw that no longer needs to hold a shape, the tongue resting where it belongs, the small muscles around the eyes softening until there is no clear boundary between looking and not looking. And as these areas relax, the rest of the body follows without resistance, shoulders easing downward, arms growing heavier, supported completely, as if the surface beneath them has always been there for this purpose. There is a sense of warmth that does not come from heat, but from the absence of effort. A quiet spreading comfort that moves slowly through the chest and the back, down through the hips and legs, until even the smallest muscles in the feet no longer feel the need to respond to the world around them. And nothing needs to be changed if some parts take longer than others, because there is no schedule to keep, no place to arrive. Thoughts may still appear, drifting in softly, but they do not require attention, and they do not need to be pushed away, because they pass naturally when they are not held on to, like faint reflections on water that smooths itself again without interruption. And as each thought fades, there is a little more space left behind, a little more quiet where the body can continue to sink. The sense of position becomes less precise, not because the body is moving, but because it no longer needs to define itself so clearly. And there is a subtle feeling of being held rather than holding, supported rather than supporting, as if the distinction between the body and the surface beneath it is becoming softer, less important, blending into a single, stable presence. Breathing flows through this stillness evenly, each inhale arriving without announcement, each exhale leaving without delay. And with every breath out there is a slight release, a gentle letting go that happens automatically, not as an action, but as a consequence of resting. And this pattern repeats itself calmly, without variation, without expectation. The mind does not need to follow the body's sensations closely now, because the body is settling on its own, finding a comfortable balance between awareness and ease. And the more it settles, the less there is to notice, until the feeling of the body becomes broader, less detailed, more like a general sense of presence, rather than a collection of individual parts. Time begins to feel less structured here, stretching quietly in the background, no longer marked by moments or transitions, just a continuous, gentle flow that does not ask to be measured. And within this flow there is nothing urgent, nothing incomplete. Only the simple act of being at rest. If attention drifts, it does so naturally, not away from anything important, but into a softer state where focus becomes optional, where awareness can widen or narrow without consequence. And this drifting is not a loss of control, but a sign that the system is slowing down in the way it is meant to. The chest rises and falls in a steady rhythm. The abdomen moves gently with it, and these movements are smooth and predictable, like waves that have been repeating themselves long enough to no longer need observation. And with each repetition, the sense of effort continues to fade, replaced by a quiet steadiness. The body feels heavier now, not in a restrictive way, but in a grounding way, as if it is settling more deeply into support, finding a position that requires no adjustment, no checking, no awareness beyond the simple comfort of being still. And this heaviness is reassuring, a signal that there is nothing more to do. Sound, if it exists at all, remains distant and unimportant, blending into the background rather than pulling attention outward, and the mind allows it to pass without response, without labeling, without interest, because the internal state has become more consistent, more absorbing in its simplicity. The breath continues, calm and uninterrupted, and the pauses between breaths grow slightly longer, not by intention, but by relaxation, and these pauses feel natural, unremarkable, as if they have always been this way, when nothing interferes with them. There is a growing sense of stillness that does not feel empty, but full in a quiet way, filled with the absence of tension, filled with the absence of demands. And within this stillness, the body remains completely safe, completely supported, free to rest as deeply as it chooses. Awareness begins to soften around the edges, becoming less focused on any single sensation, more diffuse, more evenly spread, and as it does, the need to stay alert diminishes naturally, without effort, without decision, simply because there is no reason to stay alert here. The body rests in this state easily, breathing steadily, muscles loose, weight fully supported, and nothing needs to change for this to continue, because this state maintains itself quietly, moment after moment, without guidance, without instruction, allowing the transition into deeper rest to unfold at its own gentle pace. Time no longer feels like something that moves forward in clear steps, because the markers that once defined it begin to soften, stretching out into a continuous flow that does not separate one moment from the next. And within this flow there is no need to keep track, no reason to notice how long anything lasts, because nothing here depends on sequence or progress. The mind may still recognize the idea of time in a distant, abstract way, but it does not hold on to it, allowing it to remain vague and unfocused, like a concept remembered without details, And as this happens, the sense of waiting dissolves, replaced by a quiet acceptance of whatever duration exists, whether it feels long or short, or something in between. Breathing continues as a steady anchor, though it no longer feels like an anchor at all, more like a background motion that blends into everything else. And as the breath moves, the spaces between thoughts grow wider, not as an effort to create silence, but as a natural result of slowing down, as if the mind has less to arrange, less to organize. Moments begin to lose their edges, merging gently into one another, so that it becomes harder to tell where one ends and the next begins. And this lack of definition feels comfortable, not confusing, because there is no requirement to distinguish anything precisely. No need to assign meaning to the passage of time. The body remains still and supported, but the awareness of its position becomes more general, less concerned with exact placement. And this allows attention to drift inward, not toward any specific point, but toward a broad, calm state where sensations exist without calling for interpretation. Thoughts, when they appear, arrive without urgency, and they leave without resistance, passing through like soft impressions that do not interrupt the underlying calm. And as each thought fades, it leaves behind a sense of openness, as if time itself has more room to stretch, more space to unfold without structure. There is no sense of being early or late here. No pressure to move toward anything, because the usual reference points have loosened their grip, and in their absence, time becomes something that simply exists, steady and unremarkable, flowing quietly beneath awareness. The rhythm of the body aligns with this flow, movements slowing, not because they are controlled, but because there is nothing pushing them forward, and even the smallest internal motions feel smoother, less defined, as if they are part of a single, continuous process rather than separate events. Attention drifts again, gently, without direction, and this drifting does not feel like losing focus, but like widening it, allowing awareness to spread evenly across a calm internal landscape, where nothing stands out strongly enough to demand notice. The idea of duration becomes increasingly abstract, no longer tied to counting or measurement, but to a simple sense of continuity. And within this continuity, there is a quiet reassurance that nothing is being missed, nothing is falling behind, because there is nothing that needs to be reached. Breathing moves through this softened sense of time effortlessly, each cycle blending into the next, and the subtle pauses feel spacious, as if time itself is resting in those pauses, lingering there without concern for what comes after. The mind does not need to check in on the body now, because the body is stable and comfortable, and this allows awareness to float freely, untethered from detail, drifting through a state where time is present, but no longer prominent. Moments stretch, not in a way that feels slow or heavy, but in a way that feels expansive, as if there is more room within each one, more quiet space, where nothing needs to happen, and this expansion creates a gentle sense of ease, a feeling that there is plenty of time for rest. The usual signals that mark the passage of time, changes in thought, changes in sensation, changes in focus, begin to soften as well, blending together, so that awareness rests in a steady, even state, not pulled forward by anticipation or backward by reflection. There is a growing sense that time is no longer something external that must be navigated, but something that exists within the same calm field as the body and breath, moving gently without direction, without urgency. As this continues, the distinction between now and later becomes less meaningful, and awareness settles into a state where it is enough simply to be present, without defining that presence in relation to anything else, without measuring it against an internal clock. The mind allows this to happen naturally, releasing the habit of tracking, of organizing, of sequencing, because none of those functions are needed here, and in their absence, time feels softer, quieter, more accommodating. Breathing remains steady, and the body remains still, and within this stable foundation, time continues to blur, becoming less of a concept and more of a background sensation, a gentle, continuous movement that does not require attention. Awareness floats within this softened temporal space, calm and unhurried, and as it does, the need to remain alert fades further, replaced by a quiet comfort in not knowing how long anything lasts, in allowing time to pass without acknowledgement. There is no effort involved in maintaining this state, because it sustains itself, moment after moment, without direction, without demand, and the mind rests easily within it, comfortable with the absence of structure, comfortable with the slow, even unfolding of time as it gently recedes into the background. There is no longer any requirement to remain fully aware, because awareness itself has begun to loosen, settling into a quieter form that does not need to observe every sensation or follow every shift. And this change happens gently, without instruction, as if the system naturally understands that it can rest more deeply now. The body continues to breathe in its own steady way, and the breath no longer feels like something that needs to be noticed, because it has become part of the background, a soft, reliable movement that supports rest rather than drawing attention to itself, and this allows the mind to step back even further, giving space for stillness to grow. Any remaining sense of effort begins to dissolve, not through force, but through permission, a quiet allowance for everything to slow down without consequence, without judgment. And as this permission settles in, the subtle tension that comes from trying to stay present or attentive fades away. There is nothing that needs to be held in memory now, no detail that needs to be retained, because remembering is no longer useful in this state. And the mind understands this instinctively, releasing information as easily as it once gathered it, allowing thoughts to appear and disappear without leaving a trace. The feeling of rest deepens as attention drifts further inward, or perhaps outward, though the distinction no longer matters, because orientation has become less defined, and the sense of being located in a specific place gives way to a broader, more diffuse presence that does not require clarity. The body feels stable and secure, supported completely. And this sense of safety does not come from any particular source, but from the absence of demand, the absence of urgency, and within this safe stillness, there is no need to monitor the environment or maintain readiness. Awareness softens further, like light dimming gradually rather than switching off. And as it dims, the edges of perception blur, making individual sensations less distinct, less separate, until they blend into a single, calm field of experience that does not ask to be understood. Breathing continues evenly, and the spaces between breaths feel generous and unhurried, as if there is plenty of room for rest within each pause. And these pauses do not signal an ending or a beginning, but simply another part of a smooth, continuous rhythm. The mind no longer tries to follow the flow of experience closely, because it recognizes that nothing important will be missed, and this recognition allows it to relax its grip, easing into a state where observation becomes optional rather than necessary. Any lingering thoughts slow down as well, becoming less defined, less structured, more like impressions than ideas. And as they soften, they require less attention, eventually fading into the background without resistance, without the need to be resolved. There is a quiet sense of settling here, as if everything has found a comfortable position and no longer needs to adjust. And this settling brings with it a feeling of completeness, not in the sense of finishing something, but in the sense that nothing is lacking. Time, already softened, recedes even further from awareness, becoming almost irrelevant, and without time to track, there is no reason to remain alert, no reason to anticipate change, because whatever unfolds will do so gently, without disruption. The body remains still, and the mind follows its lead, mirroring that stillness internally, and this mirrored calm creates a stable state where awareness can drift without direction, without purpose, simply resting in the absence of activity. There is no need to decide to sleep, because the conditions for rest are already present, and the transition happens naturally. When there is no resistance, when there is no effort to remain awake or engaged, sound, sensation, and thought blend together into a soft background hum, indistinct and unimportant. And within this blended state, attention becomes lighter, less anchored to any single point, free to float without concern. The breath continues to move, steady and quiet, and each exhale carries with it a subtle release, a gentle letting go that happens automatically, further easing the system into a deeper level of rest. Awareness becomes more diffuse, spreading thinly across the experience until it no longer concentrates on anything in particular, and this diffusion feels comfortable, reassuring, like sinking into a familiar state that does not require explanation. The sense of self grows quieter as well, not disappearing, but becoming less prominent, less defined. until it feels more like a background presence than an active point of reference, and this quieting removes the need to stay oriented or aware. Everything slows, not abruptly, but smoothly, as if guided by an internal rhythm that favors rest. And within this slowing, there is no need to intervene, because the process unfolds on its own. The body remains safe and supported, breathing calmly, muscles relaxed, and the mind rests alongside it, no longer separate, no longer active, simply present in a softened way that allows rest to deepen further. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to consider, and this absence of task creates a gentle openness where awareness can fade as much as it wants, without concern for losing control or missing anything. The state maintains itself quietly, without guidance, without effort, and within this self-sustaining calm. The transition into deeper rest continues naturally at a pace that feels effortless, unforced, and entirely acceptable. A sense of space begins to form without announcing itself, not as a place that needs to be understood or mapped, but as a gentle awareness that there is room around you, open and accommodating, extending in all directions without clear edges, as if the environment has always been present and is simply being noticed, now in a softer way. This space does not press in or pull away, and it does not demand orientation, because there is no up or down that matters, no distance that needs to be judged, only a quiet surrounding presence that feels stable and constant, allowing awareness to rest within it without needing to define where it begins or ends. The body remains supported as before, but the sense of being contained expands outward, blending with the surrounding space so that the boundary between inside and outside feels less distinct, less important, and this blending brings a subtle comfort, as if the environment itself is participating in the act of holding and supporting. There is no sharp detail here, no lines or surfaces that require attention, only a broad impression of openness, a calm volume that exists without structure. And within this volume, nothing moves quickly, nothing changes abruptly, everything simply exists in a steady, unhurried way. Awareness drifts gently through this space, not traveling from one point to another, but settling evenly throughout it, as if it can rest everywhere at once. And this even distribution of attention removes the need to focus, to choose a direction, or to follow anything in particular. The sense of space feels familiar in a way that does not rely on memory, not something recalled, but something recognized at a deeper level, as if this openness has been encountered before without needing to remember when or where, and this familiarity adds to the feeling of ease, of belonging without explanation. Breathing continues quietly within this broader context, and the rhythm of the breath seems to align naturally with the surrounding stillness, neither standing out nor disappearing, but becoming part of the overall environment, another gentle movement within a larger, calm field. There is no sense of arrival here, because nothing has been reached, and no sense of departure. because nothing has been left behind. Only a gradual settling into a space that does not mark transitions, that does not differentiate between before and after, existing instead as a continuous presence. The environment does not reveal itself all at once, and it does not need to, because understanding is not required, and clarity is not the goal. And this lack of demand allows awareness to remain relaxed, unchallenged by complexity or novelty. Any perception of distance remains vague, more a suggestion than a measurement. And this vagueness feels reassuring, removing the need to locate oneself precisely, to know how far anything extends, or how close anything might be, because none of that information is necessary for rest. The space feels quiet, though not silent, calm without being empty, filled with a subtle sense of continuity that supports stillness rather than interrupting it. And this continuity creates a stable background where nothing stands out strongly enough to draw attention away from rest. Awareness becomes comfortable within this surrounding openness, settling into it as easily as the body settled into support earlier, and just as the body required no effort to rest, the mind requires no effort to remain within this space, because the environment does not challenge or stimulate it. There is no need to imagine what this space looks like, because visual detail would only add unnecessary structure, and the absence of clear imagery allows the experience to remain soft, adaptable, and non-specific, perfectly suited to a state of deepening rest. The sense of space remains consistent, neither expanding nor contracting noticeably, maintaining a gentle equilibrium that feels steady and reliable. And this steadiness reinforces the feeling that nothing unexpected will happen, that there is no need to remain alert. Awareness floats within this environment without resistance, not held in place, but not drifting away either, simply existing in balance, supported by the quiet, surrounding presence that asks for nothing and offers nothing beyond calm stability. Time, already softened, blends further into this spatial awareness, becoming part of the same background impression, so that space and time feel intertwined, both present but neither demanding attention, both existing as gentle contexts rather than active elements. The body continues to rest easily within this larger sense of space, breathing steady, muscles relaxed. And the mind mirrors this ease, settling into the surrounding openness without question, without analysis, without the need to engage. This space does not introduce itself or define itself, and it does not need a name, because its purpose is not to be identified, but to be felt in the most minimal way possible, as a quiet container for rest. Awareness remains here comfortably, surrounded and supported by this broad, undefined environment, and there is no reason to move away from it, no impulse to explore further, because the space already provides exactly what is needed for rest to continue deepening at its own gentle pace. Nothing changes abruptly, nothing begins or ends clearly, and within this steady, open presence, the transition into deeper calm continues naturally, supported by the simple fact of having space to exist without demand, without direction, and without the need to be anywhere else. Light begins to be noticed in a very gentle way, not as something that shines or points from a particular direction, but as a soft presence that seems to exist everywhere at once, evenly spread, without a center, without a source that needs to be located or understood. It does not arrive suddenly, and it does not brighten the space sharply, but settles in gradually, like a thin layer that rests over everything, making the surrounding openness feel more accessible without becoming defined. And this kind of light does not create shadows that ask to be examined, because there is no strong contrast, no edge where brightness clearly ends and darkness begins. The space remains calm under this diffuse illumination, and nothing within it becomes sharper or more detailed, because the light is not meant to reveal, only to soften, to allow awareness to rest without straining to see or interpret. And this softness feels natural, as if this is the way the environment prefers to exist. Alongside this gentle presence of light, there is a steady sense of temperature that settles comfortably around the body. Not warm enough to draw attention, not cool enough to create alertness, but balanced in a way that allows the body to remain relaxed without needing to adjust or respond. The air feels mild and consistent, touching the skin lightly without stimulation. And this neutrality creates a subtle sense of ease, because the body does not have to compensate or protect itself, does not have to generate warmth or release heat, simply existing comfortably within a stable range. There is no fluctuation here, no sudden change that might require awareness to sharpen, and this consistency allows attention to drift even further from the physical sensations, because they no longer signal anything that needs to be addressed. The diffuse light continues to fill the space evenly, not moving, not flickering, not intensifying, and because it does not change, it does not invite focus, remaining instead as a quiet background condition that supports rest rather than interrupting it. The body responds naturally to this balance of light and temperature, settling more deeply into stillness. Muscles remaining loose, breathing steady, and this physical ease reinforces the sense that the environment is stable and accommodating, offering no resistance to rest. There is no need to identify the quality of the light, because it does not resemble anything familiar enough to compare. And without comparison, the mind remains relaxed, free from the habit of labeling or categorizing what it perceives. The temperature remains steady, surrounding the body evenly, rather than concentrating in any one area. And this evenness removes the impulse to shift position, to seek comfort, because comfort is already present without effort. Awareness takes in this balance passively, not examining it, not reacting to it, simply allowing it to exist as part of the broader state of calm that has been developing. And this passive reception feels easy, requiring no participation. Light and temperature together create a sense of gentle containment, not enclosing tightly, but providing a subtle boundary that feels reassuring rather than restrictive, as if the environment itself is maintaining the conditions needed for rest. There is no indication of time passing through changes in light or temperature, because neither of them shift noticeably, and this absence of variation removes another signal that might otherwise pull awareness outward, leaving the internal state undisturbed. The space remains open, and the light within it remains diffuse, and the temperature remains neutral. And because all of these elements are consistent, they blend together into a single, unified background sensation that does not stand out as separate components. The body continues to breathe easily, and the breath does not feel affected by the environment, because the air does not challenge it, does not feel heavy or thin, simply present in a way that supports steady, effortless breathing. There is a quiet sense of equilibrium here, where nothing dominates and nothing recedes entirely, and this balance creates an environment where awareness does not need to choose what to attend to, because nothing demands priority. The diffuse light does not draw the eyes, and the neutral temperature does not draw the body, allowing both to remain at rest. And this lack of pull helps awareness remain diffuse as well, spread gently across the experience without concentrating. Any remaining inclination to analyze the surroundings fades further, because there is nothing to analyze, nothing changing, nothing revealing new information, and in this informational quiet, the mind settles comfortably. The environment feels complete without being specific, stable without being rigid, and this quality reinforces the sense that there is nothing more to discover here, nothing that requires engagement, only a steady state that supports continued rest. Light remains present without emphasis, temperature remains neutral without variation, and together they create a soft, consistent atmosphere that feels inherently safe, not because it has been assessed, but because it offers no challenge to the resting system. Awareness continues to float within this atmosphere, supported and unpressured. And the longer it remains here, the less distinction there is between noticing the environment and simply existing within it. The body does not react, the mind does not respond, and this lack of response is not a sign of absence, but of alignment, as if everything has settled into the same calm rhythm. There is no reason for attention to sharpen or retract, because the conditions remain unchanged, and this stability allows rest to deepen naturally, without effort, without guidance. The diffuse light and balanced temperature remain constant, quietly present. And within this steady background, awareness continues to soften, drifting further into a state where observation is no longer necessary and rest is allowed to unfold at its own gentle pace. A subtle sense of movement begins to register within the space, not as an event that arrives suddenly, but as a quiet change in texture, a gentle shift that becomes noticeable only because everything else remains so still. And this movement does not ask for attention. It simply exists alongside the calm that has already settled. At first, it is difficult to tell where this movement comes from because it has no clear direction and no clear source, only a soft continuity that seems to pass through the environment evenly, as if the space itself has begun to breathe in a different way. Then, without becoming stronger or more defined, the movement takes on a familiar pattern, one that does not need to be identified immediately, because it reveals itself slowly, through repetition rather than intensity, through consistency rather than force. The sensation is light and steady, touching the surrounding space without weight, without impact, and it continues at the same pace without interruption, without signaling a beginning or an ending. And this continuity makes it feel less like an occurrence and more like a condition. There is no heaviness in this movement, no sense of pressure or accumulation, because it does not fall with urgency. It does not strike or gather. It simply passes through, moment after moment, in the same gentle way, allowing the environment to remain open and unstrained. The air shifts almost imperceptibly as this movement continues, carrying a mild, even flow that does not cool or warm noticeably, only refreshing the space in a subtle way. And this flow does not push against the body or pull at awareness, remaining so light that it blends into the background. This movement does not create a strong sound, and if it produces any audible presence at all, it is soft and distant, more like a texture than a noise, something that merges with the existing quiet rather than interrupting it. And because it remains so understated, it does not pull attention outward. The pattern remains unchanged, repeating itself evenly, and this repetition brings with it a sense of reliability, because nothing about it suggests escalation or variation, and this predictability allows awareness to relax further, no longer needing to monitor what is happening. The movement continues over and around the space, not gathering in any one area, not leaving any part untouched, but doing so in such a balanced way that no specific point becomes more noticeable than another, maintaining the same gentle presence everywhere. There is no sense of shelter or exposure required, because this movement does not threaten comfort, and the body does not respond to it with tension or alertness. Remaining at ease, breathing steadily, muscles relaxed, as if this condition has always been part of the environment. The light remains diffuse as before, unchanged by this motion, and the temperature remains stable, and together they allow this new element to integrate seamlessly into the overall state, becoming another layer of calm rather than a disruption. The movement continues without rhythm that needs to be followed, without pulses that demand attention, simply ongoing, consistent, and this lack of variation makes it easier for awareness to drift, because there is nothing new to track, nothing changing that might call for focus. Any sense of time tied to this movement dissolves quickly, because there is no clear marker for when it began, or how long it has been present, and without those markers, It feels timeless, as if it has been occurring far longer than awareness has noticed it. The body does not react to this steady presence, and the mind does not label it, because both recognize that there is no need to interpret something that remains so gentle and constant, and this recognition supports continued rest. The movement passes softly through the space, again and again, without accumulation, without intensity, and because it does not demand response, it becomes easy to ignore in the most comfortable way, like a background condition that supports stillness rather than challenging it. There is no anticipation of change, because nothing about this movement suggests that it will increase or stop, and this absence of expectation removes another layer of alertness, allowing awareness to sink deeper into the calm state that has been forming. The environment remains open, light remains soft, temperature remains neutral, and this steady movement weaves through it all quietly, becoming part of the larger, unchanging atmosphere that encourages rest without effort. As the movement continues, awareness no longer distinguishes it clearly from the surrounding space, because it blends so well into the overall sensation, becoming another subtle aspect of the environment that does not stand out, does not require notice. The body remains supported, breathing calm and even, and the mind remains at ease, allowing this gentle, ongoing motion to exist without engagement, without interpretation, simply present as part of a stable, restful state. Nothing about this movement introduces urgency or interest, and because of that, it serves to deepen stillness rather than disrupt it, reinforcing the sense that the environment is safe, predictable, and conducive to rest. The movement continues on, unbroken and unremarkable, and within this steady continuation, awareness softens further, content to remain within a state where change is minimal, sensation is gentle, and rest is allowed to deepen naturally, without instruction, without effort, and without end. A quiet sense of familiarity begins to settle in, not as a memory that can be traced back to a moment or a place, but as a feeling that exists on its own, gentle and unquestioned, as if this environment has been encountered before, without ever being stored as a clear recollection. And there is no image attached to this familiarity, no scene that replays itself, only a subtle recognition that does not ask for confirmation, and this recognition feels calm rather than curious, because it does not bring with it the need to remember how or when it first appeared. The space, the light, the steady movement that continues without interruption, all feel known in a way that bypasses thought, as if awareness accepts them instinctively, without comparing them to anything else, without trying to place them within a personal timeline. This sense of having been here before does not arrive with emotion, positive or negative, but with neutrality, a quiet acceptance that removes the feeling of novelty, making the environment feel settled and established rather than new or unfamiliar. There is no attempt to search for details that might trigger memory, because the mind recognizes that nothing specific is required, and this absence of searching allows the feeling of familiarity to remain soft and unchallenged, existing comfortably in the background. The movement that continues through the space no longer feels like something newly noticed, but like something that has always been present, repeating itself so consistently that it blends into the sense of continuity that defines this environment. Awareness rests within this familiarity easily, because it does not stimulate interest or concern, and without those reactions, there is no reason to become more alert, no reason to engage more deeply with the surroundings. The idea of arrival fades further, because there is no clear moment when this place began to feel known, and without that moment, the distinction between being here now and having been here before becomes irrelevant. The body responds to this familiarity by remaining relaxed, breathing steady, muscles loose, as if it recognizes that there is nothing here that requires preparation or defense, nothing unexpected that might disrupt rest. The environment feels settled, not static, but stable, carrying the impression of having existed in this form for a long time, and this impression reinforces the sense that there is nothing new to discover, nothing that needs attention. Awareness does not try to name this feeling, because naming would add structure where none is needed, and without a name, the familiarity remains abstract, more like a tone or a background state than a defined concept. There is no curiosity about what lies beyond this environment, because curiosity depends on novelty, and novelty has already dissolved, replaced by a sense of quiet acceptance that this is simply how things are. The steady movement continues, unchanged, and because it does not vary, it supports the impression that this place has been the same for a long time, repeating itself without deviation, without interruption. The light remains diffuse, the temperature remains balanced, and together they contribute to the feeling that nothing has shifted recently, that the conditions here have been consistent long enough to become familiar without ever being remembered. The mind does not attempt to connect this familiarity to personal experience, because doing so would require effort, and effort feels unnecessary here, out of place within such a calm, established state. Instead, awareness allows the feeling to exist on its own, without explanation, without context, simply as a quiet certainty that this environment is not foreign, not demanding, not new. The absence of clear memory does not create discomfort, because the familiarity does not depend on recall, and without the need to remember, there is no sense of loss or confusion, only ease. This place does not feel like it needs to be explored, because exploration implies discovery, and discovery implies change, and here, change feels unlikely, unnecessary, almost incompatible with the steady calm that defines the environment. The body remains still and supported, and the mind mirrors this stillness, settling into the familiarity without question, without attempting to understand it more fully. The sense of having been here before becomes less noticeable over time, not because it disappears, but because it no longer stands out as a separate sensation, blending instead into the overall state of calm that surrounds awareness. The environment continues as it has been, steady and unremarkable. And this continuity reinforces the feeling that nothing has shifted, that this place does not mark beginnings or endings, only ongoing presence. Awareness does not mark time here, and without time, the concept of first or last loses meaning, making familiarity a natural state rather than a result of repeated exposure. There is no contrast to heighten perception, no new element to draw attention, and because of this, the environment feels complete as it is, requiring no engagement to feel settled within it. The mind remains relaxed, content to exist within this known, but unremembered state, and the body remains at ease, breathing steadily, supported by conditions that do not change. The feeling of familiarity becomes quieter still, fading into the background as something assumed rather than noticed. And this assumption creates a deeper level of comfort, because what is assumed does not require monitoring. Nothing announces itself, nothing signals a shift, and within this unchanging, familiar environment, awareness continues to soften, resting easily in a place that feels known without ever having been remembered, allowing calm to deepen naturally, without effort, without direction, and without the need to be aware of anything more. The pattern continues without announcing itself, not restarting and not progressing, simply repeating in the same gentle way it has already settled into, as if it has no awareness of beginnings or endings. Only a steady presence that remains consistent over time. There is a soft alternation that becomes noticeable only because it remains unchanged, a quiet sequence where movement eases, then resumes, then eases again, not in a way that needs to be followed, but in a way can be felt faintly in the background, like a rhythm that exists whether it is noticed or not. This repetition does not carry emphasis, because nothing within it stands out strongly enough to demand attention. And because of that, awareness does not lock onto any single part of the cycle, allowing the pattern to pass through experience evenly, without creating peaks or pauses that matter. The movement remains light and steady, continuing for a while, then giving way to stillness that is not complete, followed again by the same gentle motion, and this alternation feels natural, expected, because it does not introduce variation, only continuity. There is no build-up within this cycle, no gradual increase or decrease that might suggest change, because each repetition mirrors the last closely enough that the difference between them becomes unimportant. And this sameness removes the need to track where one phase ends and another begins. Awareness begins to recognize the cycle not as something to observe, but as something to rest within, because it does not require interpretation, and it does not present new information, existing instead as a stable background that supports stillness. The body remains unaffected by the repetition, breathing evenly, muscles relaxed, posture unchanged. And this lack of response reinforces the sense that nothing here requires action or adjustment. Nothing needs to be anticipated. The alternation continues quietly, movement easing into rest, rest easing back into movement, each transition smooth enough that it barely registers. And because these transitions do not stand out, they do not interrupt the growing calm. There is no sense of waiting for one phase to end or another to begin, because both feel equally unremarkable, equally gentle, and without preference. Awareness does not lean toward either, remaining balanced and neutral. Time becomes even less distinct within this repetition, because cycles usually mark time. But when the cycles themselves do not change, they stop functioning as markers, blending instead into a continuous flow that feels uninterrupted. The mind does not count repetitions, because there is nothing to count, and even if it tried, the sameness would make counting meaningless, removing another layer of mental activity without effort. The repetition continues, unaltered, and with each pass, it becomes easier to let it fade into the background, because nothing about it draws focus. And this fading allows attention to soften further. There is a gentle predictability here that feels reassuring, not because it promises anything, but because it does not surprise, and this absence of surprise reduces the need for alertness. The cycle does not accelerate or slow noticeably, maintaining the same even pace. And because of this consistency, awareness does not need to adjust, remaining comfortably aligned with the environment. Movement flows for a while, then recedes into quiet, then returns in the same soft way, and these phases do not feel separate, only slightly different textures within the same calm state. The body responds by remaining still, supported, breathing steady, and this physical stability mirrors the environmental repetition, reinforcing the overall sense of balance. The mind begins to treat the repetition as part of the baseline, no longer something that stands out, but something assumed, like a constant that does not require acknowledgement. As the cycle continues, the distinction between noticing and not noticing it becomes less clear, because awareness no longer lingers on it long enough to form a clear impression, allowing it to pass through experience without leaving a trace. There is no effort involved in maintaining this state, because the repetition sustains itself, continuing regardless of attention, and this independence allows awareness to disengage further. The alternation remains gentle and even, without sharp edges or strong contrasts, and because of that, it supports a state where awareness can drift without resistance. Time stretches quietly beneath the repetition, no longer measured by it, but carried along by the same steady flow, making duration feel unimportant. The body remains calm and comfortable, breathing unforced, muscles loose, and this physical ease makes it easier for the mind to remain passive, not directing, not following, simply resting. The repetition does not suggest progression, and because there is no sense of moving forward. There is no sense of falling behind. Removing another potential source of tension. Movement eases, rest follows, movement returns, all without emphasis, all without change. And this sameness creates a soft, continuous field where awareness can settle deeply. The cycle continues, repeating itself quietly. And the longer it persists, the less it feels like a sequence of events, and the more it feels like a single, extended condition. Awareness remains within this condition comfortably, not needing to observe it closely, because nothing within it varies enough to require focus. The mind allows the repetition to continue without interference, recognizing that it does not need to be managed, and this recognition supports deeper rest. The alternation remains present, steady and unbroken. And within this steady presence, awareness becomes more diffuse, less anchored to specific sensations. The body remains still, supported, breathing calmly, and the repetition continues alongside it, not interacting, not demanding, simply existing. There is no signal for change, no indication that the pattern will shift, and this absence of expectation allows awareness to settle even more fully. The repetition carries on, gentle and even, and within this unchanging rhythm, the mind finds it easy to let go, to remain passive, to rest without effort. Nothing about the cycle requires attention, and because of that, attention softens naturally, drifting deeper into a state where repetition fades into background continuity. The movement continues, the rest follows, and the sequence repeats without alteration, creating a stable, predictable environment that supports sustained calm. Within this steady repetition, awareness no longer seeks novelty or variation, because there is none to be found, and this lack becomes comfortable. The cycle remains unchanged, and as it does, the sense of being present becomes quieter, less defined, allowing rest to deepen without direction. Everything continues evenly, without emphasis, without transition, and within this ongoing repetition. Awareness rests easily, supported by a rhythm that does not change, does not end, and does not require notice. The repetition continues in a way that feels organized without being directed, as if the ongoing movement belongs to a larger process that does not require awareness, intention, or oversight, simply operating as it always has, steadily and without variation. There is a sense that what is happening is not random, yet it is not planned either, existing instead as part of a quiet structure that maintains itself automatically, without decision, without preference, and without any need to adjust or respond to conditions. The movement follows its pattern precisely because nothing interferes with it, not because something is guiding it, and this absence of guidance gives it a calm neutrality, removing any suggestion of purpose or outcome, leaving only the continuation itself. Awareness does not perceive any mechanism clearly, only the effect of something that operates consistently in the background, maintaining the same gentle conditions over and over again. as if the environment has settled into a stable configuration that no longer requires change. This ongoing process does not accelerate or slow, and it does not respond to observation. Because it is not sensitive to being noticed, continuing at the same even pace, whether attention rests on it briefly or drifts away entirely. The sense of order here is subtle, not defined by visible structure or distinct parts, but by reliability, by the fact that nothing deviates, nothing interrupts, and nothing needs correction. And this reliability supports a feeling of safety without explanation. The body remains unaffected by this system, like continuity, breathing calmly, muscles relaxed, posture unchanged, as if it recognizes instinctively that what is happening does not require readiness or response. There is no sense of control involved, no impression that anything could be adjusted or influenced, because the process does not acknowledge external input, existing independently of observation, intention, or desire. The movement continues evenly, as if carried by an underlying arrangement that has always been in place. Not constructed recently, not maintained actively, but simply present as part of the environment's baseline state. Awareness does not attempt to understand how this process functions, because understanding would add unnecessary complexity, and complexity feels incompatible with the quiet steadiness that defines this state. Instead, the mind accepts the continuation as given, as something that does not need to be solved or interpreted, and this acceptance allows attention to soften further, releasing the impulse to analyze. There is a faint impression of structure without detail, a suggestion that the environment is composed in a way that supports this ongoing motion naturally, without effort, without oversight. But this impression remains abstract, never resolving into a clear image or concept. The repetition aligns perfectly with this unseen structure, reinforcing the sense that everything here operates according to the same quiet consistency, without deviation, without exception. Time becomes even less relevant within this automatic continuation, because systems that do not change do not mark duration, and without duration to track, awareness has fewer anchors to hold on to. The mind drifts comfortably within this state, recognizing that there is no need to intervene, no role to play, because the process unfolds exactly the same way, regardless of attention. The body mirrors this non-interference, remaining still and supported, breathing steady, allowing the environment to do whatever it does without response or concern. There is no signal of intention behind the ongoing movement, no sense that it exists to achieve something or lead somewhere, because it does not point forward or backward, only continuing in the same way it always has. This absence of purpose removes another layer of mental engagement, because purpose invites expectation, and expectation invites alertness, neither of which are needed here. The environment feels self-sustaining, not maintained by effort, not dependent on input, simply continuing because that is its nature. And this self-sufficiency feels deeply calming. Awareness becomes more passive as it recognizes that nothing here changes in response to perception, making observation unnecessary, even irrelevant, and this recognition allows attention to loosen further. The repetition continues quietly, embedded within this automatic state, reinforcing the sense that what is happening is part of a larger, stable arrangement that does not require understanding. There is no indication that this process could stop or start, because it does not present itself as an event, only as an ongoing condition that exists independently of awareness. The body remains calm and comfortable, breathing evenly, muscles relaxed, and this physical steadiness aligns naturally with the environment's unchanging operation. The mind does not look for meaning here, because meaning implies interpretation, and interpretation feels distant and unnecessary, replaced by a simple acceptance of continuity. The suggestion of structure remains faint and undefined, never becoming specific enough to engage thought, existing only as a quiet background impression that supports the steady repetition. Awareness floats within this automatic flow without resistance, not participating, not observing closely, simply present in a softened way that allows rest to deepen naturally. The process continues, unaltered and unresponsive, and within this constancy, attention finds it easier to disengage from detail, to remain diffuse and unanchored. There is no need to stay alert, because nothing here responds to alertness, and nothing changes based on readiness, making vigilance unnecessary. The repetition persists, supported by an unseen arrangement that does not announce itself, and this persistence reinforces the sense that the environment is stable beyond awareness. The mind rests alongside this automatic continuation, comfortable with not knowing how it works or why it exists. Because neither question matters here, the body remains still, supported, breathing calm and even, and the environment continues its quiet operation without interruption. Nothing about this system invites involvement, and because of that, involvement fades naturally, leaving only a steady, ongoing state where awareness can remain passive. The repetition continues within this automatic framework, steady and unchanged, and as it does, awareness softens further, content to rest within a process that does not need understanding, does not seek purpose, and does not require attention, allowing calm to deepen quietly and without effort. Attention begins to turn inward without deliberately changing direction, not moving toward a specific point within the body, but settling into a broad internal awareness that does not require focus or definition. As if the sense of inside has expanded to include everything that is being felt. The boundary that once separated internal sensation from external presence grows softer, less distinct, until it no longer feels important to determine where one ends and the other begins, because both exist within the same calm field of experience. Sensations inside the body remain present, but they are no longer sharp or localized, spreading gently instead, becoming more like general impressions than specific signals, and this diffusion makes them easier to rest within, because nothing stands out strongly enough to demand attention. The breath continues, but it is no longer experienced as movement through a particular area, more as a subtle internal motion that fills the entire sense of being, rising and falling everywhere at once rather than in a single place. The heartbeat, if it is noticed at all, feels distant and even, not marking time, not signaling urgency, simply present as part of the overall internal rhythm that continues without emphasis. There is a sense of warmth and solidity within the body that does not originate from any one point, spreading evenly, creating an impression of fullness without weight, presence without pressure, and this internal steadiness feels deeply reassuring. Thoughts, when they arise, no longer feel separate from sensation, because both appear within the same internal space. And as a result, thoughts lose their usual sharpness, blending into the background rather than standing out as distinct events. The idea of an observer within the body becomes less clear, because observation implies separation, and here separation is dissolving, leaving behind a unified internal state where experiencing and existing feel like the same thing. There is no need to locate awareness precisely, because it is no longer centered in one area, spreading instead throughout the entire internal landscape, making it impossible to say where awareness resides or where it begins or ends. The internal environment feels calm and continuous, not segmented into parts. And because of this continuity, there is no impulse to move attention from one sensation to another, no scanning or checking required. Breathing continues steadily, but the sensation of breathing merges with the broader internal awareness, so that inhalation and exhalation feel like subtle shifts in overall presence, rather than distinct actions. The sense of self grows quieter within this internal field, becoming less defined, less anchored to any particular sensation or thought, until it feels more like a background tone than a central reference point. There is a gentle sense of floating within the body, not in a spatial way, but in a qualitative one, as if awareness is supported internally without needing to hold itself together. Internal sensations lose their urgency, no longer signaling needs or actions, simply existing as part of the calm, steady background that supports rest. The distinction between feeling and thinking becomes less relevant, because both arise within the same softened internal space, and neither dominates or pulls attention strongly. There is no sense of monitoring what is happening inside, because nothing inside feels incomplete or unsettled, removing the need to check or adjust. The internal state feels stable and self-contained, not isolated from the surrounding environment, but integrated with it, as if the idea of inside and outside has merged into a single, continuous field. Awareness does not cling to any particular internal sensation, allowing each one to pass through gently, without forming a focal point that might sharpen attention. The body remains still and supported, And this physical stillness reinforces the internal calm, making the internal environment feel spacious and unpressured. Time becomes even less relevant within this internal focus, because internal sensation does not mark duration clearly, existing instead as a continuous presence without milestones too. The mind no longer distinguishes between observing the internal state and simply existing within it, because observation implies effort, and effort is no longer necessary. There is a quiet sense of coherence within the internal experience, not because everything is understood, but because nothing is conflicting or demanding resolution. Internal awareness continues to soften, becoming less structured, less defined, and this softening allows the sense of being to feel more diffuse, more evenly spread. The breath moves gently through this internal field, not altering it, not disrupting it, simply passing through as another subtle internal motion. There is no impulse to define or label what is happening inside, because labels would create separation, and separation has already begun to fade. The internal experience remains calm, steady, and unremarkable, and this unremarkable quality makes it easy to remain within it without effort. Awareness rests comfortably in this internal space, no longer distinguishing clearly between sensation and perception, between body and mind. The sense of inside becomes broader and less specific, until it no longer feels like a contained area, but like an open, continuous presence. Within this presence, nothing needs to be adjusted, nothing needs to be understood, and this absence of need allows rest to deepen naturally. The internal state sustains itself quietly, without guidance, without effort, and as it does, the distinction between internal and external fades further, leaving awareness free to remain diffuse, calm, and unengaged, supported by a sense of being that does not require boundaries. Sound becomes present in a way that does not arrive from a single direction, not approaching or receding, but existing as a broad, even layer that surrounds awareness without drawing it outward, as if the environment has settled into a quiet acoustic balance that does not change. There is a steady, gentle texture within this background, not loud enough to be noticed sharply, not quiet enough to disappear, simply consistent, and because it remains so even, it does not invite attention, allowing awareness to rest without following any particular element. The sound does not form distinct events, and it does not rise or fall in a way that marks time, existing instead as a continuous presence that blends into the calm already established, reinforcing the sense of stability. Within this background, there is a soft, repeating quality that does not stand out as individual moments, but as an ongoing layer, smooth and uninterrupted, and this continuity makes it easy for awareness to accept it without reaction. The air carries faint movement through this sound, subtle enough that it feels more like a gentle shift in texture than a separate element. And this movement does not push against the body or draw the ears toward it, remaining distant and unobtrusive. Nothing within this soundscape suggests proximity because it does not feel close enough to require attention, and it does not feel far enough to create curiosity, existing instead at a comfortable, undefined distance. The sound does not resolve into clear shapes or sources, and this lack of definition prevents the mind from forming images or expectations, keeping the experience abstract and unengaging in the most restful way. Awareness notices the sound briefly, then allows it to blend into the background, because it does not change, does not intensify, and does not signal anything that requires response. The steady presence continues, consistent and unremarkable, and because it does not fluctuate, it becomes easier to ignore without effort, remaining present without demanding acknowledgement. The body does not react to this background layer. Breathing remains steady, muscles remain loose, and this physical calm aligns with the unchanging nature of the sound, reinforcing the overall stillness. The sound does not contain identifiable patterns that might encourage tracking, because repetition here does not form rhythm in a way that stands out, existing instead as a uniform field. Any sense of direction fades quickly, because the sound does not originate from a point that can be located, surrounding awareness evenly rather than approaching from one side or another. The mind does not search for meaning in this sound, because there is nothing to interpret, no signal hidden within it, only a steady presence that exists without intention. The background remains constant, and within this constancy, the mind feels less inclined to remain alert, because alertness serves no purpose when nothing changes. The sound does not carry emotional weight, and it does not evoke memory or association, because it lacks distinct qualities that might connect it to past experience. There is no sense of activity behind the sound, no indication of beings or actions nearby, only the impression of a large environment continuing quietly on its own. This absence of clear sources removes the impulse to imagine or visualize, allowing awareness to remain diffuse and unfocused. The sound blends seamlessly with the internal calm, becoming another layer of the same steady state rather than a separate element to be noticed. As attention softens further, the sound seems to recede without actually changing, simply becoming less prominent as awareness becomes less concerned with external input. The background remains present, steady and even, and because it does not fluctuate, it does not interrupt the flow of rest that has been developing. There is no sudden quiet and no sudden increase, only the same gentle consistency, and this predictability reinforces the feeling that nothing unexpected will occur. The body remains at ease within this soundscape, breathing calm and regular, posture unchanged, supported by the absence of stimulation. The mind does not differentiate between moments of sound and moments of silence, because the background does not shift enough to create contrast. This lack of contrast allows awareness to drift further inward, because there is nothing external pulling it outward. The sound continues without interruption, And within this continuity, time feels even less defined, because sound often marks duration, and here it does not. The background layer feels distant but surrounding, present but unobtrusive, existing in a way that supports stillness rather than breaking it. Awareness does not hold on to the sound, allowing it to pass through experience without forming a focal point. The environment remains quiet in a broad sense, not silent, but balanced. And this balance creates a stable auditory space where nothing demands engagement. The sound does not fade completely, because complete silence might draw attention, and it does not grow louder, because that would disrupt calm, remaining instead at a consistent, gentle level. The mind rests comfortably within this auditory background, no longer distinguishing clearly between listening and not listening, because the sound does not require either. The body remains supported, breathing steady, muscles relaxed, and this physical ease aligns naturally with the unchanging auditory environment. There is no need to adjust or respond, because the sound does not signal change, does not imply presence, and does not suggest movement nearby. The background continues, even and unremarkable, and within this steadiness, awareness becomes lighter, less anchored to sensory detail. The soundscape does not introduce novelty, and because of that, it allows rest to deepen rather than interrupting it. Awareness remains diffuse, floating within the combined calm of internal sensation and external background. Without focusing on either, the sound persists quietly, and as it does, it becomes part of the overall state rather than a separate element, blending into the same gentle field that supports rest. Nothing within the auditory environment calls attention forward or backward, leaving awareness free to remain passive. The background layer continues unchanged, and within this unchanging presence, the mind finds it easier to let go of monitoring. The sound does not end and does not begin anew, existing instead as a constant condition that does not require acknowledgement. Awareness settles deeper into this state, comfortable with the steady, distant background that surrounds without engaging. The body remains calm and still, and the sound continues alongside it, not interacting, not responding, simply present. Within this consistent auditory field, the distinction between external sound and internal quiet softens, allowing both to merge into a single, calm background. The environment remains stable, and the sound remains even, and together they support a state where awareness no longer needs to listen actively. Rest continues to deepen naturally, supported by the absence of change, the absence of clarity, and the steady presence of a background that does not require attention. Time begins to lose any remaining sense of structure, not collapsing or stopping, but stretching quietly in all directions, as if it no longer moves forward from a starting point or toward an ending. Existing instead as a continuous presence that does not require progression. There is no clear moment that marks when this state began, because beginnings depend on contrast, and contrast has softened, leaving only an ongoing condition that feels as if it has always been in place. Awareness does not sense an approach toward anything, because there is no destination implied, and without a destination, the idea of moving through time becomes less relevant, replaced by a sense of simply remaining. The flow of experience does not suggest before or after, because each moment blends seamlessly into the next, removing the boundaries that usually separate them. And this blending creates an impression of duration without measurement. Breathing continues, steady and unremarkable, but it no longer marks time clearly, because the cycles feel less like repetitions and more like a single, extended motion that does not restart. The body remains still and supported, and without movement to reference, time loses another anchor, becoming even more abstract, more diffuse. There is no anticipation of change, because anticipation depends on sequence, and sequence has dissolved, leaving awareness without a reason to look ahead. Memory does not reach backward either, because backward implies distance from the present. And here, the present feels wide enough to include everything. Making recollection unnecessary, the environment continues exactly as it has been, without variation, and this constancy removes the sense of elapsed time, because nothing shifts to indicate passage. Awareness does not count moments, because counting requires separation, and separation has softened, leaving moments to merge into a continuous flow. The mind does not ask how long this has lasted or how long it will continue, because those questions feel irrelevant, disconnected from the current state leaf. There is a gentle sense that time is not moving past awareness, but existing within it, as if awareness itself has expanded to include duration without defining it. The body breathes. The environment remains steady, and these ongoing processes do not signal progress, only continuation, reinforcing the impression that everything simply persists. Without clear markers, the idea of duration loses meaning, and awareness rests comfortably in this timeless quality without effort. The distinction between now and later becomes increasingly vague, because both feel equally present, equally distant, and equally unimportant. Experience does not unfold in steps, but in a smooth, uninterrupted span, where nothing begins and nothing ends, and this span feels stable rather than endless in a demanding way. The mind remains passive, not tracking, not evaluating, allowing this extended sense of time to exist without engagement. The environment does not suggest change through light, sound, or movement, and without those cues, time has nothing to attach itself to, becoming background rather than focus. Awareness drifts within this extended present, not moving forward or backward, simply resting within the same calm field. The body remains at ease, and the lack of physical movement reinforces the impression that time is not passing in a conventional sense. There is no pressure to remain aware of duration, because nothing depends on it, and this removes another layer of mental activity. The extended present feels spacious, not crowded. allowing awareness to settle without urgency. Breathing continues evenly, but the pauses between breaths feel less like intervals and more like part of the same ongoing state. The mind does not label this experience as timeless, because labeling would impose structure, and structure is no longer needed. Instead, awareness allows the sensation of continuity to exist on its own, unexamined and unmeasured. The environment persists exactly as it is, and this persistence does not feel temporary, but inherent, as if it belongs to the nature of the space itself. There is no sense that something has been happening for a long time, only that it is happening, and that this happening does not change. The absence of a starting point removes the need to look back, and the absence of an endpoint removes the need to look ahead, leaving awareness free to remain where it is. The body remains calm and supported, and this physical stability mirrors the temporal stability of the environment. The mind does not attempt to anchor itself in time, because there is nothing to anchor to, and this allows it to remain diffuse and relaxed. Experience continues without interruption, without escalation, without resolution, and this continuation feels neutral, unremarkable, and safe. The extended present does not demand attention, because it does not change. And because it does not change, attention softens naturally. Awareness rests within this ongoing state comfortably, no longer distinguishing between moments, no longer tracking duration. Time feels vast without feeling empty, continuous without being heavy. And this quality supports a deeper level of rest. Nothing suggests that this state will end or begin, because those concepts have lost relevance, leaving only a steady, ongoing presence. The environment continues, the body continues, awareness continues, and within this shared continuation, rest deepens without effort. There is no need to maintain awareness of time, because time has become part of the background, and within this background, awareness can remain passive. The extended sense of time holds everything gently, not moving forward, not standing still, simply existing as a quiet, continuous field where nothing begins and nothing ends. Everything continues without explanation, not because an explanation is missing, but because none is required, and this lack of reason feels natural here, as if the environment exists beyond the need to justify itself. There is no question forming within awareness, because questions depend on curiosity and purpose, and both have softened, leaving behind a state where existence does not need to be examined or understood. The ongoing presence of movement, stillness, sound, and quiet persists in the same gentle way, not leading anywhere, not responding to anything, simply remaining as it is, and this remaining does not feel incomplete or unfinished. Awareness does not search for meaning in what is happening, because meaning implies interpretation, and interpretation implies effort, and effort has already faded from the experience. The environment does not offer signals or messages, because it is not communicating, it is simply present. and this presence does not ask to be decoded or translated into understanding. The body remains calm and supported, breathing evenly, and this physical steadiness mirrors the conceptual steadiness of a state that does not require purpose. Nothing suggests that there is a reason behind the continuation, and nothing suggests that there should be one, making the absence of reason feel appropriate rather than lacking. Awareness rests within this condition comfortably, because without reason to engage, there is nothing to hold onto mentally, nothing to analyze or resolve. The repetition continues. The environment remains unchanged, and these ongoing elements do not imply progress or direction. Only persistence, and this persistence feels neutral and safe. The mind does not attempt to frame what is happening as part of a story or process, because stories require causality, and causality feels distant and unnecessary here. There is no expectation that something will happen next, because expectation depends on sequence, and sequence has dissolved, leaving only continuation without anticipation. The environment does not respond to awareness, and awareness does not respond to the environment, creating a balanced state where interaction is minimal and optional. The absence of purpose removes the impulse to remain alert, because alertness is usually tied to anticipating outcomes, and here, outcomes are irrelevant. Breathing continues quietly, not as a signal of life or function, but simply as part of the same ongoing state that does not require interpretation. The body does not feel like it is doing anything, and the mind does not feel like it is observing anything, because both have settled into a shared state of non-engagement. Nothing in the environment suggests that it exists for a reason, and this suggestion, free existence, feels restful because it removes pressure to understand or respond. Awareness allows everything to be exactly as it is, not because of acceptance as a decision, but because there is no alternative presented, no contrast to push against. The continuation does not accumulate meaning over time, because time itself has softened, leaving no framework in which meaning might build. The mind does not label this state as meaningless, because labeling would impose judgment, and judgment has no role here, replaced by simple presence. The environment persists, steady and unremarkable, and this persistence does not feel empty, only uncomplicated, free from demands. The body remains supported, breathing calm and regular, and this physical ease reinforces the sense that nothing needs to be done or understood. There is no sense of loss in the absence of meaning, because meaning implies something missing without it. And here, nothing feels missing. Awareness does not attempt to grasp what is happening, because grasping would imply something to hold, and there is nothing to hold onto. The continuation remains gentle and even, not changing, not concluding, not leading. And this evenness allows awareness to rest without effort. The environment does not offer clues or patterns to decipher, and without clues, there is no impulse to solve anything. The mind remains passive, not because it is forced to be, but because passivity feels natural in a state where nothing requires response. Everything exists quietly, without explanation, and this quiet existence does not feel temporary or transitional, only present. The absence of purpose removes the need for orientation, because orientation depends on direction, and direction no longer matters. The body continues to breathe, the environment continues to persist, and awareness continues to exist within this shared continuation. Nothing suggests that this state should change, and nothing suggests that it should remain, making both possibilities irrelevant. Awareness does not differentiate between significance and insignificance, because both concepts rely on comparison, and comparison has faded. The continuation feels complete without being meaningful, stable without being justified, and this completeness supports deeper rest. The environment does not care whether it is noticed, and awareness does not care whether it understands, creating a balanced state of non-relation. The mind does not ask why things are this way, because the question does not arise, having lost its context. Everything continues simply because it does, without reason, without explanation, without need. Within this uncomplicated continuation, awareness finds it easy to let go of engagement, to remain passive, to rest. The body remains calm and supported, breathing steady, and the environment remains unchanged, and together they sustain a state where nothing needs to be questioned. The continuation persists quietly, and as it does, awareness softens further, comfortable with existence that does not explain itself, does not justify itself, and does not require understanding, allowing rest to deepen naturally, without direction, without effort, and without end.